This is a show about facing fear, unlocking courage, and taking action.
Courage isn't necessarily a daunting thing.
It's going to give you more purpose. It's going to give you more drive.
It feels like making a courageous decision is going to get you closer to who you aspire to be.
It's knowledge plus faith plus action equals courage.
And what I've realized is I think I've met my soul tribe in this group. Like, these are people who want to use the best of capitalism to make the world better for everyone. I have the best job title. Our CFO calls me the conscience of the company. I love that.
So I'm going to start with a true story. And I debated whether to share this on this episode. And then I reminded myself, oh yeah, Ryan, it's the Courageous Podcast. Like, how do you not share? So I once worked with a company, not a small company in the US, global presence. But I remember being at one of those very important meetings when they rolled out like a new purpose statement. And the CEO rolls this thing out, and the purpose statement was pretty much about their commitment to shareholder value and shareholder return. And while I appreciate the bluntness, this does not get me up in the morning. And if I had my way, this is not the company that I just have to work for. For me, it's about impact. Making an impact to me is just as mission critical as making a profit. And I really believe it's the brands that aren't simply chasing quarterly earnings, but the ones that are brave enough to chase significance that will outperform the rest across the next decade. Which leads to my guest, who I've known for, it feels like almost a decade. I'm sure I'm getting this wrong. It's probably been 5 years, but COVID blew everything up. Sona Khosla, who is the Chief Impact Officer at Benevity, which is all over the place, by the way, which is so great. And your new CEO does live in my hometown, which is amazing. Although maybe that should be my first question, Sona. Is she moving? Don't you love it when someone asks you a question about somebody else? Is she moving or not moving? She's staying here? What do you know? What can you tell us?
Oh, well, I mean, it's San Diego. I'm sure you can guess the answer. She's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I can't say that I blame her, but Sona, you have the best title in the business, Chief Impact Officer. And I'd love for you to sort of explain how you arrived there and your journey. Like, did you come out of marketing? Were you in the purpose space, corporate responsibility? Can you share a little bit about your story?
Yeah, you bet. First, thank you so much for having me on, Ryan. We have known each other for about 5 years, but I think when you meet people who are kindreds, it just feels like, oh, I know you. And it was definitely like that when I met you. So thank you so much for having this conversation. I'm excited to be here. I mean, maybe first I'll just start with who is Benevity, because I would say even though Benevity is well known in some spaces, we're kind of a well-kept secret in kind of broad consumer awareness. So we are a B2B tech platform, and we help large enterprises manage their impact. And so we help large companies, like you name it, all the household brands that you can imagine, power their positive impact, whether that's through the grants that they make to their nonprofits, through engaging their employees in things like volunteering or disaster relief or humanitarian aid, or whether it's getting them involved in donations, like supporting the causes they care about and matching them, or even what we call employee mobilizations. So supporting employee resource groups, which of course have had a massive groundswell since 2020 and have gone through a lot in just the last year, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But those are kind of the main areas of how we support large kind of global companies like the one you were referring to in your opening, Ryan. Yeah, I came to Benevity about 10 and a half years ago, which is insane to me. I never thought I would work for a company for 10 and a half years. I think that in and of itself proves your opening statement around we look to work for companies that have significance, that drive impact, and that allow us to have an impact. I'll be honest, when I came to Benevity, I didn't even know what CSR or corporate social responsibility was, but I was intrigued. And I came there to lead their marketing team. And about 4.5 years into kind of helping scale the business and the marketing engine, I actually fell quite in love with the impact space itself and realized, hey, I don't think I actually want to market our products. I want to figure out how we can help these large global enterprises engage their consumers, their employees, their nonprofit partners their executives and having a greater impact. So I spun off about 5 years ago almost into a little social innovation lab called Benevity Impact Labs. We basically look at all of the data. We process about $3.8 billion a year through our platform, from large companies and their employees to nonprofits. So we have an incredible wealth of data to understand what is happening. How are people giving? How are companies responding? And so we just felt that that data could be liberated for way greater good than just if Benevity used it for our own commercial purposes. And so we started up this lab where we do a lot of data and research. We bring executives together to help them understand how to make sense of that data, but also for them to tell us like what is happening in their world and what systems and supports do they need to actually make change. And then the third part of the lab is bringing more innovation into the company. So we are out there, what we call on the fuzzy front end of impact and inclusion, seeing what's going on. We bring it in, we incubate it, and then things that, have legs will move into our product development life cycle. So it's kind of a lean machine. We're only 3 people in the lab. But what I didn't realize, Ryan, that I was doing, now that I look back, I was like, oh, I pivoted my career from a marketing track to an impact track. And I didn't really know it until, 6 months in the job. I was in a room with people who had nonprofit backgrounds and governance backgrounds. And I was like, oh my God, I don't belong here. I had this moment. But then all of a sudden I was like, you know what? Okay, I made this decision. And what I've realized is I think I've met my soul tribe in this group. Like, these are people who want to use the best of capitalism to make the world better for everyone. And it's just like, there is no other place I would rather be. So yes, I have the best job title. Our CFO calls me the conscience of the company, which
Beautiful.
I love that. Way shorter. I could have just said that.
No, I like all of it. And you kind of cut me off on my next question, but you kind of, at first when you explained it, like, it's that could be a very hard ask, right? To move. I mean, you've been standing up marketing. Obviously, if it's going well, you're doing your job well. You have a C-suite that wants everyone to be the part of the machine that they are. And it's not easy to go, hey, I know I've been trained in this and we've done this well and it's stood up and I think X can jump in and do it. But there's this other thing that I want to check out, that I'm curious about. It's funny, our last episode, you used the word soul. I would call her my soul sister, Frankie Isley. She's in Australia. And like, it's eerie how like I wrote a book about courage. She wrote a book about courage. I'm an optimist. She's an optimist. And we ended up on a word that we both enjoyed, which was curiosity. And so this is curiosity 101. But if you do take us back to that moment, and the reason I'm going here is I think a lot of our listeners, sometimes they think about like, what would life be like if I just asked for the promotion, or what would life be like if I just shifted to another job? So, but you did it. So take us back to that moment, like hard sell, easy sell, terrifying sell. Like you said, it wasn't until you were in the room that you're like, oh my God, what have I done?
And what have I done to my earning potential? That was the other thing. I was like, oh my God, CMOs are in demand. All the recruiters stopped knocking on my door. But anyways, that's a whole other thing. But I am actually really glad you asked this question, Ryan, because it was probably the scariest thing I've done. But what prompted me was my mom had died about a year earlier. And something just happens when a parent dies. It's like, I was in my early 40s, and like everything that's in the back of your mind about what I'm going to do later, she died suddenly. So everything that happens, like I've got time, it's like it flies to the front of your consciousness and you're like, I might not have that time. And so I thought to myself, I have to do the things that I think I need to do now, because if not now, when? I don't know that I'm going to have a future. And so it felt that urgent. What was happening in the business at the time, so this is happening in my personal life where I'm like wrestling with, what do I need to do to make sure I die fulfilled? But fulfilled for me, but also fulfilling what possibility I could create in the world. That was like going on the personal side. On the business side, I had a new boss. She was the former CFO of Benevity. Her name's Kelly, and she just moved into a president role. And so we literally had our first one-on-one. And so she, like any good leader, says, hey, Sona, so like you've been here for, almost 5 years. Like what's next for you? What are you thinking about? And in that moment, I thought, I have a thing like I just can't lie and I just can't not say either. I can't keep it to myself either. And so
Right.
I said, actually, I don't want to do marketing anymore. And then I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I just did that because basically now my boss knows that I don't want to be in the job I'm in. And in her head, she's already doing, okay, who I need to start recruitment. And I didn't know that I had another job. But what I said is, listen, I think we're sitting on a massive asset here. We sit at the nexus of nonprofits, individuals, and companies. We have all this data. I think we can do something with this. And I want to get out there. My mom and I used to joke. She would say, like, because when I was little, I said to my mom when she asked me, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I said, "I want to be a radio." And I was 5 years old. I'm sure my parents were questioning my IQ at that time. But it was the running joke in our family was, well, what do you have to broadcast? And in that moment, I was like, I think we have things that are worth broadcasting. And so I said, I would love to do more research, more writing, more speaking, and bringing this data out into the world. And Kelly, to her credit, said, well, great. That's exactly what we need. And so she was
Wonderful.
bought in that moment. But the thing was, we had new investors coming in. And so there was about a 7-month process to, okay, you've hired these investors and the person you thought who was leading marketing no longer wants to do it. That's like a bit of a bait and switch. Now we got to make sure that they're okay with, this new role. And so luckily the investors were incredibly supportive because they saw the potential from their perspective. Of course, there was value in differentiating and really maintaining category leadership and maintaining a strong voice because our CEO at the time was going to step down and Kelly was going to take in the CEO role. And she was like, great, I'm a CFO. I need someone who's going to do this thought leadership evangelism thing with me. So it was this beautiful like intersection, but it doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes what you want isn't what the company needs. I got lucky. What I wanted was what the company needed.
The conscious has spoken, folks. The conscious has spoken. And also, in the moment, right? Like, was that a courageous move or a reckless move that it slipped out? I mean, it was a true move.
Yeah.
It was honest, right? And it's so funny. This week alone, I was on the phone with someone I'm coaching who is been at a company for 15 years and is hurt. He's like, it's like a scab because they're closing down an office in a city and he doesn't want to move. And he's gonna, and he feels like he's been loyal to this company. And now he's like, no, it's just, well, where was my 15 years, where was like the loyalty back to me? And so I'm like, wait a minute, that doesn't, just because this happened here doesn't mean that every company, like you shouldn't shun all of corporate America just because this moment happened. And it reminds me of when I was on my leadership lab writing Return on Courage, the premise going in was courageous ideas are the only ones that matter. And I think we still believe in that. I still think we think in this media obese world, when you're not there to defend an idea,
Yeah.
right? Does your idea stand out on its own? And as I went on the journey and interviewed all these leaders, I had I'll go with the PG version. I had my oh shoot moment, which was courageous ideas die without courageous leaders.
Okay.
Like, and the concept got much wider, faster, and we realized we need to be in the leadership space, teaching leaders why this is important, why, as hard as it is. And so I commend the willingness and the openness, right, even of a CFO on how to become a CEO, because that's courageous too.
Yeah.
And it's very lonely. The higher up you get, the more lonely you feel.
Yeah.
So I could see why the yin and yang worked. I'm not totally sold right now that corporations are getting the power of purpose right now. And it's like, for some now it's like, it's an eye roll. And I think our current leadership coming out of DC is certainly like taking us back a little bit. We had this topic of quiet quitting that became a thing and it was fast, and you get it. People were like, I'm not going to tolerate this anymore. I don't need to tell you, but I'm out.
Yeah.
And now it's almost like a quiet courage that's needed to stay down the path of impact, to stay down the path of purpose. I mentioned at the top, I have no doubt that this is a slow cooked long game. It's sad to admit that, but it feels like people are very quiet right now, from my seat at least, on the impact purpose space. Are you, again, I don't know if legal gets involved in this or not, but like, what are you seeing this? Are you feeling this?
Yeah, definitely, Ryan. I mean, I would say as early as January, there's been just a massive chilling effect on social impact, especially corporate social impact, right? Like as we started to see the executive orders and directives and attorney general memos start to roll out, and even just news that wasn't necessary, and like rumors generated more chilling effects, right? We saw pullbacks in funding from international aid, public broadcasting, scientific research, everything DEI. And what I would say is it's been quite a journey over the last 10 months of just a massive roller coaster of like, complete shock. Like, is this really happening? And then hope that this is just all going to go away. It can't possibly roll out. And then, oh my God, it is rolling out. And then I think what ended up happening is people in my role, the people who lead impact programs, sustainability programs in companies, started to realize we can't be on our back foot on this. There are very real consequences. If you are a federal contractor or if you are a nonprofit that's federally funded, like there is material risk to your business. And as a CEO, you're like, your fiduciary responsibility is to make sure that the business continues. You can't lose those contracts. So it is the definition of a bind. Companies were in a bind. And I remember feeling completely abandoned almost, right? Like, where did everyone go from the last 2 years? Was it all like just lip service? Was it real? Like real questioning and real abandonment, I would say. And especially I think for people of color, people of any kind of minority representative group, like all of a sudden it's like, wow, like we were being heard and being seen. And then all of a sudden it was like orders come out and it's like, I'm still here. I'm still the same person, but now you can't talk about me. Now you can't fund me. Now I can't get into a mentorship program. And it was just this strange, like so many emotions. But what we just recently at Benevity dug into the data because there's headlines about, companies backing off their DEI mandates. And then, of course, companies not saying anything. Like, so you're seeking, where is the courage? Who is going to say this? Who has the power? Constantly, every day looking for someone who would be the voice of the other side, standing up to like what we saw in 2020 and 2021. Where were they? And so we were like, okay, let's look into the data. And when we looked at our data, we were shocked. First of all, what we found was, yes, companies have gone quiet. They are changing their language. So on the outside, you're seeing, less DEI, more inclusion, more culture, more belonging, more talent, more workforce development. When you kind of step back, what we noticed was that they are working very hard to remain in compliance. So especially with their federal contractors, like we have to be compliant because we will lose funding. But what they're also doing is finding really clever ways to stay compliant, but to continue the work. And so a very tiny fraction of our clients are making material changes to their programs. They're maintaining their commitment to the core of these principles, which actually you could argue is merit. It is merit. That is what they're trying to achieve. But they're doing it in new ways. They might be changing partnerships. They might be changing language, but we're seeing the money still flow. We're seeing the support still flow. We are seeing a lot of companies leaning into their employee resource groups actually and saying, we need to prove to our people that we still care. And this is the way that we do it. It's by actually investing in this community. Now, have they had to make changes? Like they have to allow everyone into every group now? Yes. Have they had to step back on specific maybe mentorship programs that were only allowed for certain people? Yes. So they've made those changes, but they're continuing the work. And so I would say we were looking for the same kind of courage that we had back in 2020, but it is quiet courage that has emerged. And unfortunately, Ryan, like I think that's that's the reality. That's what we can, what we can expect. I mean, there have been a few people who have stepped out lately. Jane Goodall in her farewell video was, but I mean, it's telling when someone can only do it after death.
Totally. It's so crazy. I have I have a new book coming out called Head of Mentals, and it looks at self-talk and how we can spiral ourselves. And it's very hard to lead somebody else if you're not leading yourself. And we looked at the data by age on how much people care. And the older you got, the less you cared about other people, what other people thought about you. So that makes a lot of sense. Sadly, that it was after death. But like the older we get, the more we seem to care less about what other people think finally.
Yeah.
And we can speak up. But and go back to what I said about courageous ideas, the only ones that matter. No, not just that. Courageous ideas die without courageous leaders. This shouldn't be a courageous idea, by the way.
Ultimately, I think CEOs will be doing their jobs if they maintain an authentic focus on purpose that is true to their business. They don't have to do it all. I would say that was the lesson in 2020. People stepped out of their strengths and their assets and what they're really good at, and it was dilutive. It didn't really hold. And then of course they stepped back on commitments because it wasn't authentic to them and it wasn't what they do best. But I think what we've learned in the last 5 years is the purpose has to be core to who you are, core to your business, core to your stakeholders. And then it drives business value. All the data shows it. There's reams and reams and reams of data on this.
I've always felt that, okay, I'm 3,000 miles away from DC. I live in San Diego, and sometimes I don't love this strategy, but there's so much anxiety that my wife's like, I'm turning off the news. It's like, that's a strategy. Okay. Like, you want to be informed, but you got to also protect your sanity and your mental health. And it can feel chaotic, and cortisol goes everywhere when you're watching the news. So we're citizens of this country, and and Canada has their citizens too. But I always felt that every corporation is also in its own way a nation. There are citizens that work there. Every corporation flies a flag, whether it's a real one or one that we're feeling. And those citizens of that country, we'll call it that nation of a corporation, they have a say. It's not just the CEO who might be the mayor or the president or the right of that flag flying nation. So for the listener who wants to do more good but feels small inside that big organization, they're still a citizen of that place. What's like one courageous first step they can take tomorrow, should take tomorrow, without having to go to their version of, I'm air quoting, Congress inside their company where they because nobody wants to feel like they're putting their job at stake right now. I think there is a lot of fear. So what advice do you have for them? Like one small thing someone can do inside a big organization?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think you're exactly right. And I think you've probably seen these stats that CEO turnover is at its highest peak right now. And it doesn't surprise me. The pressure on CEOs right now is significant. They're having to deal with so many more issues, whether it's geopolitics or tariffs or AI or, like you name it, social crises, environmental crises and costs to their business, right? So it's a tough job. And I think kind of where you went to is actually the right place, Brian. At some point, listening to all of this news makes you feel helpless and sometimes hopeless. But we're not helpless. We can make change, and it's through action. And so there's a few things I would say. One is, if you're an employee at a company that has a program where you can donate to the cause you care about, do it now. Your nonprofits are suffering and they need support. You can take action. If you can volunteer with them, man, they're looking for volunteers. Go volunteer with them. You will feel an intense sense of efficacy by doing that. And your company will probably match those dollars or give grants if you volunteer to these companies. So money will flow. And actually, I will say some companies who have been bold enough to run campaigns to support nonprofits this year, they've done it without political messaging. All they've had to say is, Support the nonprofit you care about. One of our clients had a 56% year over year growth in the amount of donations made. The other one had 90% growth. What does that tell you? It tells you people have a desire to make a difference and to make an impact. All you have to do is show up and ask. And so I think that's one piece. The other piece I would say, and I really learned this myself, so this is like very personal to me this year, was I sit on the executive team at Benevity. And so I get to be in the conversation and be at the table where decisions are made. And ask yourself, are you the only person who can say this? If you are, then it's not courage, it's a responsibility. You have a responsibility. And when I realized sitting at the table as the chief impact officer, I'm not doing my job if I don't raise the challenges of the positive impacts or negative impacts we could have. AI is a great example. Of course, every tech company is talking about AI. Every company is talking about AI. We are talking about AI. And so it's like, we need to talk about how there's a major gender gap in AI. We need to talk about the environmental elements of it. We need to move fast, but we need to move consciously. And so, and that is my job. And so I would ask people, ask yourself, are you the only one at that table who can say that thing? And if so, it is your responsibility to do it. And what you can do is start small. Like, that's the thing. It's not like just all of a sudden you make these big statements and everyone is like, oh my God, it's like no angels come out, no one crowns you, nothing. But you just start small. Like, and then you realize that actually courage begets courage. You do the little thing, and then all of a sudden you're doing bigger things and saying, I don't want my job anymore. And so it's true, though. It's practiced. I contend courage is practiced.
Do you guys have you created any collateral on starting small? Because I think that would be, this is the business hat version of me showing up. I try to do my best to stay in my podcast lane here and just like, it's all about you and, like guiding this conversation. But I think when I hear you share that, I'm scared. I'm overwhelmed for all the reasons that we've talked about. I'm sure I've talked about this on the podcast. I've definitely talked about this in a keynote where I feel like we're in a worry war. You heard that correctly. We've been in many worry wars before. And I would actually say the pandemic was worry war 1, where it was an isolation illness. And I'm not sure we won that war. We just started fighting another one, which is the cost of eggs and empathy erosion at work and what our leaders are going to say. And the death of DEI is, for at least from my lens, it's called something else now. This is worry war 2. And if worry war 1 was the pandemic, this is pandemonium. So I feel flustered as a leader. I feel flustered even as a citizen of a corporation. It would be like a start small kit feels like something that could really sort of like short circuit me back into, yes, you can make a difference and a dent. Or is it a video? I don't know what it is. Maybe you already have this. You and I haven't talked about this. I'm curious where your brain is on this misconscious.
Yeah, I mean, we do actually help promote small acts, and so we're coming up into what we're calling giving season, which is where 40% of annual donations are made in just these last few months of the year, and we're concerned that people are not going to get involved because of the price of eggs, because I'm worried I'm going to be replaced by AI. But here's the thing: in the pandemic, many people were furloughed. They didn't know if they were going to have their jobs. They didn't even know if they would be able to do their jobs and not get sick and maybe die. And we saw an outpouring of support. And so in my head, I'm like, we do have challenges, but they're not as existential as they were in the moment as the pandemic was and people gave. And so I would just say, right now, you can give to a nonprofit $5, $10. It will make a difference. You can give an hour. It will make a difference. What I've learned when you start doing that is it becomes something you want to do more. And I'll just give you another stat. Like, what we've found is, and I think this corroborates what you're saying, Ryan, is the number of people giving their own money through their corporate programs has gone down. It's actually reached a low. And it's a drop below 50% of donors are giving their own money, 50% are not. And actually, if we stay on track, it'll land at about 43% of donors giving their own money. And that is a major problem for the social structures. And so you don't have to give a lot. You don't have to be high net worth. And so I would just say, just get involved. And I'll say one other thing, with all of these kind of legislative discussions and, executive orders and memos, it's definitely easy to feel despondent. Even as a Canadian, which I am, right? Like, I'm not living in the world you're living, right? So at some level, I totally recognize that it is easy for me to say because I'm north of you and I have a slightly different reality. But what I ended up doing was talking to nonprofit leaders. And I went to a conference this summer where the room was mostly nonprofit leaders. And I would say the corporate leaders had way more fear. And the nonprofit leaders were like, we've done this before. We can do this. We can keep the work going. And I think that's the thing. If you can't find the courage yourself, surround yourself with people who are just doing it. It is amazing. Like, I walked out of that room and I was like, we can totally do this. Like, they've done it in worse conditions. And so surround yourself with people who can, and it'll give you the energy. Like that, some of that courage will rub off.
No, I love hearing that because I've spoken at nonprofit conferences before, and I do sometimes worry about, we need more entrepreneurs in that space, right? We really do. And or just resting on your laurels or playing off the same playbook. And, anytime I've been in those arenas, it's like, it's all love, but they need to be nudged, right? Like, now, if I'm at the corporation side, I see sharper elbows, savvier leaders, being thoughtful and strategic. And sometimes that strategy is used to protect their jobs in tough times. So talk to me a little bit about arming those folks with measurement tools on how do I go right now and defend this back up to my starting small, going bigger, whatever. I'm in my company. I'm like, no, I need to, right? I have a responsibility, as you said. I don't need impact in my title to go, this is actually in line with who we are as a business, and I need to go make a case. But quantify the social good. What does courageous measurement look like? How do you kind of help companies and leaders go beyond just simple vanity metrics to the real stuff that matters?
That's a great question. First, I'm just going to challenge the leadership around nonprofits. I've never led a nonprofit, but what I will say is the level of adaptability and ingenuity and innovation that nonprofit leaders demonstrated through the pandemic is, I think, bar none, exceptional. And I think business leaders could actually take a page out of their book in terms of adaptability, ingenuity, innovation, and just the wherewithal to say, okay, we're in a moment, but we're going to keep going and we're going to completely figure out how this works. And they, nonprofit leaders were, like families couldn't get support. So like I talked to this nonprofit leader and they're like, we went into gymnasiums, we had like we were not going to stop. And I think that same mindset is definitely what I'm seeing many corporate leaders embrace. But when it comes to the actual data, I mean, some of the data I just shared in terms of what other clients are seeing when they actually run campaigns, first of all, is like, okay, they didn't have negative backlash. They had employees who loved them for running these campaigns. And they generated goodwill, trust, employee engagement, and social impact. They did it all. But there's like some great data. So Cisco is one of our clients, and they did a longitudinal study to understand how engaging in these programs actually drives business impact. And Cisco is one of those brands that just purpose is part of their DNA. And they're like, it is part of our business. It's not separate. And what they found was that employees who engage in community acts, more likely to stay with the company, more likely to be promoted, more likely to be recognized by their peers, and more likely to get a higher bonus. So, I mean, if you want to focus on your talent right now, then actually doubling down on purpose is the way to do it. There's other stats that show that organizations that invest in purpose are more innovative, that they have higher willingness to pay, they can charge a premium, and that they actually have better earnings per share because they actually mitigate a lot of climate risk that can affect their bottom line. And they get better borrowing rates because they are taking care of the environment and people. So it's the data's there. The other thing I would say is we're hearing from a lot of companies that their CEOs are afraid of who people are going to donate to in their programs, right? Like, because that reflects on the company. I would just say, like, we looked at the data. We looked at it over a 4-year period, so 2020 to 2024. 96% of the funds donated on the Benevity platform go to topics we all agree on: education, housing, healthcare, medical research. Only 4% of the funds go towards what we would call polarizing topics like gun rights, reproductive rights, human rights. And so quantitatively, there's a lot less risk than we feel. Now, I understand that all you need is one news article and it can, right? I get that. But these are calculated risks. And so I think, again, it's finding the nuance, it's finding the path and really managing your program guidelines and your ethos really carefully. What we also know is that people in this role have had a lot of leadership change. And so they're educating their leaders on the business case for this. And so we've got lots of data. There's Deloitte has lots of data. Edelman has data. Everyone's got data on this. It's just like, I don't know how much longer we're going to need data to prove what we all kind of already know. Like, look at the brands you buy from. I'm sure they're brands that actually have values that you relate to.
Totally. And it's almost embarrassing that we still have to have conversations about the power of values. And in some ways, the whole consulting side of our business, we're business mechanics. We're just like looking under the hood and going, oh, well, if we fix this, then your talent's probably going to stick around for a while. And if you don't fix this, then you're subscribing to a mentality that that's okay, they're replaceable.
Yeah.
You'll just replace them.
Our own
Is that
data,
really the company you want to run?
Exactly. And like our own data shows that, like, we studied all these tenured cohorts of employees. So everything from like you've only joined the company in the last 6 months to you've been with the company 10 plus years. And across all cohorts, you could reduce employee churn by 24% if they engage in these programs. You tell me what other employee benefit can claim that.
Yeah, I think it's just like you get what you focus on, right? So if people are like, oh, how can AI help us be more efficient? Well, yeah, no surprise that you're not looking at like, how do we help our people be more efficient? That they want to stick around. Last I checked, AI is not great at being a word of mouth machine, telling the world how great we are, right? And that they're not. AI is not at Thanksgiving dinner still here, right? Like, and so we're missing some of the basics. At least it feels that way.
Yeah.
Quick pivot. You have your podcast mini series. You mentioned it a little bit. Give me just a little bit more color there, and I'll sort of lead the witness on this one a bit. Because you've had Rose on, and I want to hear more, and I want to know how long your series has been. We've done somehow around 250 episodes now, and I got to tell you, like, my big aha. There's like one big takeaway for me, and every once in a while I'll mention this on the show, but I don't think. I mean, obviously, if you're coming on the show, I see you, and I think the world sees you as courageous. I think just the fact that you said, like, Ryan, hey, nonprofit leaders are entrepreneurial. Okay, that's your true, and that is courageous to say that back to me. Now that I'll never get another keynote from a nonprofit in my life. Thanks, Sona. That wasn't what I was saying, by the way, but we're aligned here, and we're laughing on this. No, that's not. Again, I'm all for change and the need to keep hitting the gas. But my big takeaway from now doing this for 4 or 5 years is that almost everyone that is courageous who comes on the show is really, they just are real. It's like, it's almost crazy to admit that telling the truth is an act of courage.
Yeah.
Telling the truth is an act of courage. The amount of lip biting
Wow.
that's going on. You called it, you have a responsibility. If you are running that and there's nobody else at your company, that you've got to stop the lip biting, right? Like you've got to start talking. So we have this quiet courage that's going on. At some point, that needs to get a little bit louder. I'm not saying, to your point, it needs to be a wild roar, right? But it needs to be discussed and articulated. So the aha from this podcast is that, like, hey, I see you as courageous, but you just see yourself as telling the truth and just keeping it real and honoring, what a surprise, the conscious wants to honor the conscious. From your podcast, give me like a little color. Where can people hear it? How many episodes? And then, going in, did you think one thing? And was there any sort of like, oh my goodness, now that I've gone on the journey, I learned X?
I love it. Well, I'll first say I'm not nearly as prolific as you are, Ryan. We are in our 4th season, but we do short seasons because this is just one of many elements around the data and research and everything we're doing. So I wish I could do weekly episodes. Oh man, like that would be so great. I think the thing I've learned doing the podcast is, I just have this incredible awe of how people make their way in the world. And people have figured a lot out. So I just like, we think these things are hard, but so many people have already figured it out and can help get us there with just one statement or one case study or one example or one story. And so I don't know, I'm just kind of amazed. I feel like if I could have the whole world on the podcast, I'd love to. But we have to be selective. And so the podcast is called Speaking of Purpose. It's by Benevity. And we try to feature bold leaders and change makers. To your point, very similar in mission, Ryan, like very similar in mission, just showing that you're not alone when you act courageously, that there are people out there who are doing it and who get it. And to your point, the story of the fellow who had been at the company for 15 years. Sometimes the journey is finding where you belong. And, and sometimes you have to make tough choices about that. But what I find is that sometimes what your greatest fear is can become your greatest source of strength. And so I've seen that with people who have been willing to dive into those murky territories and those dark places and emerge with some new insight and they emerge changed. And so for me, I love seeing people who've put themselves through that and come out changed. But we focus specifically on like a lot of nonprofit leaders and corporate leaders, because really what we're trying to demonstrate is that the future of business is purpose driven. At some point, we will not make a distinction between purpose driven business and business. It'll just be business and it'll happen to be purpose driven. And that I fundamentally believe is the truth. So I just want to say I love what you said about, telling the truth is being courageous, because actually as kids, we were taught to tell the truth. And somewhere along the way, to fit in or out of fear of loss, we lose that. But I fundamentally believe that the universe gives back when you live in line with your truth.
You mean when you tell your new boss that you don't want to be in marketing anymore, that somehow gets you closer to the truth and closer to what you should be doing? And here you are. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful episode. Yeah. Fire away.
I just want to say I was also willing to lose my job, because the reason for that is because I didn't want to do it anymore. So I wasn't going to perform well, and I wasn't going to enjoy it. So at some level, you're just accelerating a process. You're not actually,
I don't think it's any different than the choices that I made. I mean, it wasn't reporting into a boss, but also, like, it's funny. I don't think I'm a very good marketer anymore.
Yeah.
Frankly, I think I'm very good at brand.
Yeah.
Very good at story. I'm in the perspective business. And sometimes when you're so close, okay, if I'm gonna go back and say, it's amazing how performance marketing is one thing, but preference marketing is being left behind. I am a preference marketer at best.
Yeah.
I am not going to be your tinkerer looking for data to save my life on the short. Yes, we need data everywhere, but when it comes to preference and like setting the tone, that is my happy place. Your story resonates with me because I remembered it's like, oh, don't bury it. Don't lie to yourself.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing on the purpose conversation. And I like how you said it just happens to be a business. Just happens to be purpose. Like that's the big takeaway for me is sometimes we get flooded for all the reasons the worry war is real. Do not forget, it is the purpose-driven company that in the long game, it's turning profit. And it's saving you money because your people want to work for it. They want to talk about it. They want to scream about it. And when you make them, if you create the condition for them to feel safe about it, and again, this is not a PSA, right? Like this is, I don't work for Benevity, but I think our value systems are aligned. Sona, thank you so much for joining today. Where can people find you? Where can people connect with you?
Well, the podcast. So that's called Speaking of Purpose. It's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, if you like video. But I'm on LinkedIn. So just LinkedIn, Sona Khosla, Khosla. That's the only social media platform I'm on because I can't handle all the rest. But yeah, otherwise, those are the two best places to find me.
You don't own Sona, theconsciouskhosla.com yet? There's still an opportunity. Go get that URL. Thanks, Sona. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Courageous Podcast. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts so more people can find us. See you again next week.